All right, kia ora everyone. It's Nathan Rose from Capgemini here in beautiful Auckland, New Zealand. Some of you may recall that last year I created a model-driven app that used Azure Sentiment Analysis to predict match winners at the Women's Rugby World Cup that was played here in New Zealand last year. And I'm really excited to let you know that I'm going to be retweaking the predictive models and rerunning this for the men's tournament that's going to be played later this year. And one of the things that I was able to do is I was able to actually use PowerFX low-code plugins to help me create some better predictions for this year's tournament. So let me go ahead and share my screen and let's get into it. Okay, so this is the app that I created last year for the Women's Rugby World Cup. And as you'll recall, it pulled down sentiment scores from Azure to predict match winners based on the overall sentiment scores. And in terms of performance, the app was correct in its predictions for about 42.3% of the matches that were played at the Women's World Cup last year. So that's pretty good, right? Well, actually, we don't know that. As Seth Godin would say, as compared to what? Statisticians have a term that they call null hypothesis. And null hypothesis basically means we don't know if this result was predictive, if it was statistically significant. For example, I could create the world's most sophisticated predictive engine telling us that the grass on the pitch at the final at the World Cup this year is going to be green. Well, that's not really helpful, is it? Because the grass at the final has always been green since the beginning of time, and it will be green till the end of time. Grass is green. So creating a really sophisticated engine to let us know that grass is green isn't really helpful. Okay, so how am I going to get around this problem? I've decided to introduce the concept of a coin toss into my predictions. So I've added this coin toss element to the model-driven app. And the way I've done this is I've used a function in PowerFX called RandBetween. RandBetween is a really useful function that basically takes two numbers and generates a whole random number between them. So I've mocked this up here in my scratch pad just to show you how this works. So this is my button that's triggering this RandBetween, and I can pick two numbers and it's going to generate a random number between it. So each time I run this, you can see that it's going to generate a random number. In this case, 1 or 2, heads or tails. Pretty useful, right? Okay, so now that I know that I can effectively generate a random coin toss using PowerFX, how do I incorporate this into my app? So for this app, I've decided to use a PowerFX plugin to do this. Now, there's three reasons that I did this. Firstly, PowerFX columns, the calculated columns that I used pretty extensively in the app last year, don't currently support the RandBetween function. So basically that means I don't have a choice. I have to use a plugin. But secondly, I want the value to persist. So some of you may recall that PowerFX columns will recalculate based on their inputs every time every time those inputs change. So they don't really have the ability to say, okay, once there's a value here, don't recalculate. That would create an infinite loop, and I'm reliably told that's a bad thing. So you can't really get your data to persist, but you can do it with PowerFX plugins. So this is the plugin that I've created, and it runs on update of this match data record. And I've been able to use an if condition in my plugin logic to say when the status of this record is equal to result. So I've got my various status reasons on this record. When it's equal to result, meaning the game's been played and it's over, don't trigger this plugin, because once the game's been played, I want to be able to see, does my predicted winner based on Azure Sentiment correlate to the coin toss? Because what I'm trying to figure out here is are my predictions from Azure, are they if they're accurate 50% of the time or less to a coin toss, we're wasting our time here and it's back to the drawing board. If, however, they are more predictive than a coin toss, then we're on to something. So, so this is what my plugin's doing. So basically, if the match has not yet been played, when the match data row is updated, go ahead and run this RandBetween and patch that value to the row. So that's how I'm doing. So that's how I am simulating a coin toss in my app. All right, so let's go ahead and see this in action. So my coin toss field is null. Let's do a quick update to the record. And you can see the plugin has run and it's flipped a coin and is predicting that the England women are going to run this match, win this match. And based on my sentiment analysis, that matches up. Let's go ahead and do another update. And it's still predicting the England women. There we go. It's flipped again, and now it's predicted the New Zealand women. So every time I update this until the status reason is result. So let's go ahead and change this to result, save it. Let's run a few more updates. And we can see that the coin toss persists. So let's just approve this. Let's change it, run another update. And you can see that once we change the status reason from result to something else, the coin toss will work again. So that's how I'm simulating a coin toss in my app to work out if the predictions that are coming from Azure are statistically significant to determine, are we on to something here or are we just wasting our time for the Men's World Cup that's going to be played later this year. So thanks so much for watching. I hope this was helpful.